Yeah, it's hard to love. It sucks to breathe, but I'm still biting my tongue. I wanna praise myself instead of killing my health.
What's up, random goers of YouTube? My name is VULPIS, and I wanted to make a video for my friends on how EQ works, so here's my 2 cents on the subject. First off, the heck is EQ? Well, it's a fair question, and I guess the simple answer would be that EQ stands for equalization, a process that manipulates a sound wave on the entire audible frequency spectrum, or in short, basically, it makes specific frequencies louder or quieter using an algorithm. I'm in FL today to kind of show this off. The EQs that I have, we'll just use what Fruity Loops comes with, and that's there's a couple different EQs that they have. They have 2. They have Fruity Parametric EQ and Fruity Parametric EQ 2. Now, older EQs are I guess analog EQs are going to more likely look like this. These do functionally the exact same thing. Quite literally, the only difference is that one shows you the waveform while it's playing, and the other one just shows you what you're doing to it. Since it's a little bit easier to see what's going on with the parametric EQ, we're going to go ahead and make this a little bit bigger, and I'm kind of explain how this works. So here is the entire frequency spectrum. So all the way from 20 hertz to 10,000 hertz. And the frequency spectrum itself is made up of a bunch of different, frequencies. And frequencies are kind of the basis behind musical notes. So if you've ever heard a sine wave, for example, like if I was going to pull up, let's just get to 3 oscillator. As you can see, when I play each note, it places the actual note on a specific part of the spectrum. So you can kind of see that light up. So for C4, you'll see that it hits right about here, which is also in line with this. So this is your octave chain of your other octaves in on the piano roll. So you'll see they as we get up higher, the spike becomes much more pronounced. It's definitely more thin. And the reason for that, it has to do with the actual waveform itself being tighter. So I don't know if I have a specific, well, actually we do up here. So if you look up here, you can see the different waveforms. So the lower we get, the more spread out the waveforms get. Here, this is a better example. So that kind of shows us what the sounds actually do on the spectrum themselves. But what does this have to do with EQ? Because basically what the EQ does, as you can see, there's different knobs here, and each EQ is different. For example, I have another EQ called TDR Nova, and TDR Nova is again functionally pretty similar to Fruity Parametric EQ. They're both 7-band EQs. The only difference is that Fruity, or I guess not the only difference, but one of the bigger differences is that Fruity allows you to change the actual shape pattern of your 1st and 7th band, whereas in TDR Nova, it's just a high and low pass filter. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Specifically with this EQ, you have different bands on the EQ. Now these knobs are essentially the exact same as our other EQ here as well. So on here, if I raise, and I'll do everything analog over here, because when you start messing around with stuff on the graph here, it can get a little confusing as to what does what. But over here, this is pretty much all of the controls for the EQ itself, actually. So I can control everything from over here, and I get a finer attunement of control over what each thing does. Turn them on and off. That is kind of where we're going to start. So, as you notice, there are 7 of these. Each one of them doesn't necessarily have a purpose until it's designated so. And what these guys do is you have your volume level, which when you raise it up, it ranks the sound louder or quieter on that specific part of the frequency spectrum. You have down here, which is the frequency knob, which changes where it's placed, because remember, this is a frequency spectrum, so it goes all the way from your subs to your trebles and, you know, through the entire audible frequency spectrum that you can hear. So this knob, all this does is just move it left and right. And you have your bandwidth. Now this one is a little bit harder to understand, but bear with me on this. So when you equalize something and you raise the volume of one specific frequency band, you have where it's placed. So like I said, this frequency spectrum, but the bandwidth smooths out the curve or makes it more sharp, depending on what you are trying to achieve. Usually, sharper EQs, most that I've ever seen a sharp EQ, so like this is just taking the bandwidth all the way down to 0. Most that I've ever seen this used is when you are sweeping a frequency spectrum to listen for audible noises that aren't desirable, and then this gets pulled down. So I guess in short, to summarize again, this controls the volume, so how loud this specific frequency band is. The frequency chooses what frequency you're choosing to manipulate. So as you can also see, when I click that down, you can see I've got 95 hertz or at 39% bandwidth. So when I manipulate this, I can make the bandwidth super wide or super sharp. Like I said, it generally just depends on what you want to do with it. Now, that's kind of the basics of EQ, but we can get into some other things as well. So if we were going to remake that TDR Nova EQ, go ahead and take the bandwidth down. We have a roll-off. That's what this is called. Is essentially it's a you have a high pass, which all it does is it allows higher frequencies to pass through, and a low pass, which allows all lower frequencies to pass through. And up here, specifically with parametric EQ, you can either edit this in 2 ways. So you can either go up here and change the shape of the actual waveform. I guess I should run through all of these. So let's get somewhere neutral. Okay. So on here, this waveform up here, this sort of like branching path that kind of looks like a, it's not a parenthesis. I can't remember what the actual name of the typeface. It's next to, it's like underneath bracket on your keyboard. This will only raise and lower in a linear pattern sound. So I guess to give you sort of an example of what that would look like while sound is playing, I'll kind of give you a demonstration of that. So let's... So as you can hear, the higher frequencies essentially roll up or down depending what it is. But it is not, it's not a high or low pass filter, essentially. It is, this is mainly just for, I've seen this mainly used in boosting highs, or I guess in some cases I've seen people also use it to cut lows. Like this, you can take it all the way to the bottom with the knob, and then just place it wherever you need to. But that's what this pattern does. I think it's called, yeah, high shelf. Okay. And you have a high shelf, you have a peaking, and like I said, the peaking, all this does is it sort of creates this sort of hill, or I guess gap, depending on what you're doing with the sound. But if we were going to use it, best example would be maybe let's try it with this third band of EQ right here. As you can hear, it's boosting the specific frequency, and it creates this really interesting sound. If I was to cut this out and sort of sweep it like this, you can really hear it in the higher frequencies. That is what a peaking type does. You have your low shelf, which is basically the same thing that we saw over here with the 1. You have your band stop, which this is just a straight up cut a frequency that you just don't like. So pretty much what we were doing before. Kind of sounds like a filter when I sweep it back and forth. That's just cutting all frequencies that are in this middle range. So if I just don't want any low mids for a good chunk, of any of my low mids, I could just put it there. And I don't know why I'd do that, but that is something you can do. I haven't really seen band stops used too much, but they are a thing you can do. High passes, pretty, it's a high pass. All it does is it just allows everything that's higher than it pass through. It's kind of the gist. You have your band pass, which this is an interesting one. So it kind of forms this hill. It's kind of the same thing as our peaking, only this time it only allows frequencies within this space here. So if I sweep this back and forth, you can hear the difference. So there's that. And then you have your low pass, which, was up here on that, and you can just disable it. But what we are going to be doing with this is kind of just resetting everything back to normal. And that is functionally what EQs do. So if you wanted to know what an EQ does specifically, that is all that an EQ does. And if, there's obviously, if there's more questions and stuff, you can just type in the comments and I'll try to get to everyone. I mean, if I didn't explain it that well, but I kind of want to give some examples of what an EQ can do. So what I'm going to do actually here is I'm going to go ahead and throw on a compressor. And I'm going to put these guys on here. I have 2 different examples, one of me singing, one of me rapping, and we're just going to kind of listen to them and use our knowledge of EQs to make the sound a little bit different, make it sound a little bit, maybe hopefully better. So let's go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and compress these really quick, and then I will get back to it. All right, and we're back. So I have compressed it a bit, and I have put an EQ on both of these, and we're just going to kind of go through and see what an EQ actually does to something like vocals. So I have two different vocals here. Like I said, I have a singing part for a song that I did, and a rap sort of part that I did for a song. So let's just go ahead and listen to those back without EQ. And this, the only things that I've added so far is just a denoiser. All that does is it gets rid of some room hisses and stuff, and then a compressor, which is kind of a whole deal in itself. But in order for you to really hear the difference in an EQ, because I wanted to get it close. So I will definitely probably have to make a video on compressors. But for now, we're just going to stick with this. So let's go ahead and listen.
You were the red flag, flying out of reach and begging on my knees. Yeah, why'd you want to meet?
You're holding to a false idea. Money makes the happiness that you were dreaming about. But at the top of stacks and fuck buddy hags, you find it's all for naught and nothing amounts.
So those are the vocals. So let's go ahead and let's hop right in. So we have our EQ. Let's go ahead and listen to this sing part, and I have different EQs for different for both of those. So we'll do them each individually. So let's see.
You were the red flag, flying out of reach and begging on my knees. Yeah, why'd you want to meet?
One thing I'm noticing is that in the low end here, there are a lot of sounds. So let's go ahead and let's go to the type and change this to a high pass filter. One thing that I also should mention is the order. The order, essentially, as you can see here, it tells you the frequency band, how steep to make the curve. So if it's like a gentle curve, or if it is a steep curve. And usually when it comes to stuff, it depends on the producer, or I guess you're mixing what you like. We can go with a more gentle approach. This is probably the most inoffensive. And when I say inoffensive, I mean like it doesn't make it's not super noticeable. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and cut out most of the low end here, because we don't need any real sub in my voice. So let's go ahead and let's bring the bandwidth up a bit so that we can actually hear that. So let's start at we're gonna start here at around 200, and we're gonna walk this back until we get a good sound.
You were the red flag, flying out of reach and begging on my knees. Yeah, why'd you want to meet? You were the red flag, flying out of reach and begging on my knees. Yeah, why'd you want to meet?
That sounds pretty good. Next, let's listen to this top end and see if we want to cut or add anything.
You were the red flag, flying out of reach.
And just to let you know that I have high shelf selected on this one right here.
You were the red flag, flying out of reach and begging on my knees. Yeah, why'd you want to meet? You were the red flag, flying out of reach and begging on my knees. Yeah, why'd you want to meet?
I think maybe a tiny bit of a boost would be good.
You were the red flag, flying out of reach and...
I can give you, here's like an extreme example of like what I'm doing to the sound.
You were the red flag, flying out of reach and begging on my knees. Yeah, why?
And all I'm doing is I'm listening for that tiny little shimmer.
You were the red flag, flying out of reach and begging on my knees.
That sounds pretty good. Let's go ahead and what I'm doing here is I'm setting all of these bandwidths to 0, because what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go frequency band by frequency band, and we are going to find problem areas within our section here. Yeah.
You were the red flag.
So what I'm doing for that is I'm making the bandwidth super small on a peaking type. So if you go to here, type peaking. I drag it all the way up to the top, and I can either use this, which is pretty nice, and I'm going to sweep the frequency spectrum to find sounds that don't sound good. And I'm going to take those down. So I'm going to do, I'll say maybe 3 bands, and then we'll move on to the next one, because you can get lost in this.
You were the red flag, flying out of reach and begging on my knees. Yeah, why'd you?
Ooh, that's really loud. So let's take that. Let's take that down.
You were the red flag, flying out of reach and begging on my knees. Yeah, why'd you wanna meet?
Perfect. All right, let's go ahead and do the next one.
You were the red flag, flying out of reach and begging on my knees. Yeah, why'd you wanna meet? You were the red flag, flying out of reach and begging on my knees.
And a little word to the wise: most of your trouble area is going to be from 1000, which is here, to the 2000s area. This is so your 1000 hertz to 2000 hertz. That's usually where most problem frequencies lie, and that's because it's your mids. It's kind of ironic because the actual body, the soul of the voice, is in here, but it also is where most not fun frequencies live, and those can cause issues. So we're gonna just go ahead and sweep this, try to find some more.
You were the red flag.
Ooh.
You were the red flag, flying out of reach and begging on my knees. You were the red flag, flying out of reach and you were the red flag, flying out of reach and begging on my knees. Yeah, why'd you wanna? You were the red flag, flying out of reach and begging on my knees. You were the red flag, flying out of reach and begging on my knees. Yeah, why'd you wanna meet?
Okay.
You were the red flag, flying out of reach and begging on my knees. Yeah, why'd you wanna meet? You were the red flag, flying out of reach and beg. You were the red flag, flying out of reach and begging on. You were the red flag, flying out of reach and begging on my knees.
Ow, that hurt a lot. I'm gonna do that. And now when you see this, when bands are close together, if you want that to be a lot tighter, you can go up here, and this is your essentially your type, whether it's you know, your order. Sorry, not your type. And you can change the steepness. You can also come up here, and you can change it manually. So on bands 4 and 5, which I mean they're colored, so you can kind of see. I can make this more gentle or steeper, and I am going to make that a little steep so that I can clean those up a little bit. I'm going to do the same for these guys, because I just want to cut those problem frequencies. I don't want too much gone.
You were the red flag, flying out of reach and begging on my knees. Yeah, why'd you wanna meet?
And then we'll do one more.
You were the red flag, flying out of reach and begging on my knees. Yeah, why'd you wanna meet? You were the red flag, flying out of reach and begging on my knees. Yeah, why'd you wanna? You were the red flag, flying out of reach and
There's one. Okay.
You
And
were the red flag, flying out of reach and begging on my knees. Yeah.
so here's without.
You were the red flag, flying out of reach and begging on my knees. Yeah, why'd you wanna meet?
And with EQ.
You were the red flag, flying out of reach and begging on my knees. Yeah, why'd you wanna meet?
One more time without.
You were the red flag, flying out of reach and begging on my knees. Yeah, why'd you wanna meet?
And with.
You were the red flag, flying out of reach and begging on my knees. Yeah, why'd you wanna meet?
Sounds a little bit cleaner. At least I think so. Now I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing on my rap vocals, but I won't let you sit through that. I'll just kind of go through it, and I'll show you what I did afterwards. All right, and we're back. So what I did to this is I rolled off the low end, and I just kept it super short because there weren't any really nice low ends. Oh, I bumped my mic again. There wasn't a lot of really nice low ends in my voice, so I just wanted to cut those out completely. And usually, and this is just a stylistic thing, everyone's voice is different, and everyone's vocals, instruments, everything will sound different depending on what your gear is, what your voice sounds like, everything. So this I EQ specifically to my voice because I know my voice. Your stuff will look probably different than mine because you don't have the same harmonics. I mean, harmonics are basically what give voice character, and harmonics are basically all of the extra tones, because like I was showing you with the sine wave earlier in the episode, sine waves are very specific points on the spectrum. What gives sine waves character and makes it a little bit more than just this singular tone is those harmonics, and harmonics are basically just like extra tones in the spectrum that aren't as loud as the root tone, I suppose. All of that complicated weirdness aside, this is what I came up with. I'll play it without and with on here, so you can see what the difference is. So here's without.
You hold on to a false idea, money makes the happiness that you were dreaming about, but at the top of stacks and fuck buddy hags, you find it's all for naught and nothing amounts.
And here's with.
You hold on to a false idea, money makes the happiness that you were dreaming about, but at the top of stacks and fuck buddy hags, you find it's all for naught and nothing amounts.
Makes it a little bit tighter. Here's one more without.
You hold on to a false idea, money makes the happiness that you were dreaming about, but at the top of stacks and fuck buddy hags, you find it's all for naught and nothing amounts.
Here's with.
You hold on to a false idea, money makes the happiness that you were dreaming about, but at the top of stacks and fuck buddy hags, you find it's all for naught and nothing amounts.
And one more without.
You hold on to a false idea, money makes the happiness that you were dreaming about, but at the top of stacks and fuck buddy hags, you find it's all for naught and nothing amounts.
And one with.
You hold on to a false idea, money makes the happiness that you were dreaming about, but at the top of stacks and fuck buddy hags, you find it's all for naught and nothing amounts.
And yep, that's about it, really. So that's pretty much EQ. How to use it practically on vocals. I guess if you were going to use it on something, for instruments and stuff, you want to use it not on necessarily on loops. I guess if you were trying to go for, like, for example, if we wanted to make this sound like it was coming out of a radio, I guess there's a way to achieve that, and you can do that. So I'm just going over here and finding essentially low pass, high pass filters, and you kind of like go to the low mids, high mids, and just play it through a tin can. I guess if you go a little bit higher, I think. Kind of sounds like it's being played through, something that a lot older can't handle as much frequencies. So you can do stuff like that with EQ. You can also do what's called a filter sweep, or not a filter sweep, but an EQ sweep. So like if you wanted to know how DJs do that cool thing where it sounds like the sound kind of like gets squashed and then it like releases, here's how they do that. So they kind of do a thing like this, where I'll show you on the EQ what the actual high pass filter is doing. So they usually use a process called automation. If you don't know what that is, it's basically you give your DAW a instruction, and it sort of follows a linear keyframe pattern. If you don't know what that is, yeah, I can link a video to much better video on automation in the description. But here is what that sounds like. That's sort of like a lower sweep. Or if you wanted to muffle something, I've heard this a lot in like future funk stuff. There you go, basic filter sweep. You can do stuff like that in EQ, and that's kind of how that works. I'm sure there's other methods for it, but yeah. But anyway, that'll just about do it from me. Yeah, if you have any questions, I'll try to get to them. I'm not a professional teacher. I'm not even really a professional musician. But that being said, I feel like I understand EQs. So, yeah. Anyway, that'll just about do it. Adios.